Marcus had worked hard for everything he had. His house, a beautiful modern home with a spacious backyard and a pristine swimming pool, was his pride and joy. It was a symbol of his success, something he had earned through years of dedication and perseverance. But ever since he moved into the neighborhood, one man had made it his mission to remind Marcus that he didn't belong, at least not in his eyes. Mr. Caldwell, an older white man with a permanent scowl, lived in the house next door. From the moment Marcus moved in, Caldwell made it clear he had a problem with him. It started subtly. Long, disapproving stares from his porch, passive aggressive comments about how things were different around here before Marcus arrived, and complaints about noise even when Marcus's house was silent. But the real issue started when Caldwell saw Marcus using his own pool. The first time it happened, Marcus had just finished a long day at work. He stepped outside, stretched, and slipped into the cool, inviting water. It was a peaceful evening, the sun beginning to set, birds chirping in the distance, but then a loud voice cut through the tranquility. "Hey, what are you doing over there?" Marcus turned to see Caldwell standing at the fence, arms crossed, his face twisted in a scowl. "Swimming," Marcus replied casually, wiping water from his face. Caldwell's eyes narrowed. "You live here?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Caldwell scoffed. "Just seems strange. You sure you're not visiting?" Marcus let out a small laugh, more in disbelief than amusement. "I own this house." Caldwell didn't seem convinced. He grumbled something under his breath and walked away, but that was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Caldwell made it his personal mission to make Marcus uncomfortable. Whenever Marcus swam, Caldwell would suddenly appear in his yard, glaring or shaking his head disapprovingly. If Marcus had friends over, Caldwell would complain about the noise, even if they were just chatting. Once, Marcus caught him taking pictures over the fence. Then came the night the police showed up. Marcus had been relaxing in the pool when red and blue lights flashed against his house. He barely had time to grab a towel before two officers were at his front door. "Sir, we got a call about a trespasser using this pool," one of them said. Marcus sighed, already knowing where this was going. "This is my house, my pool." The officers exchanged glances. "Do you have proof of ownership?" Marcus clenched his jaw but kept his cool. He went inside, grabbed his ID and some paperwork, and showed them. They apologized, but the damage was done. As the cops walked away, Caldwell stood smugly on his porch. "Just making sure everything's in order," he called out. Marcus didn't respond. He knew exactly what Caldwell was doing, trying to push him out, trying to make him feel like an outsider in his own home. But Marcus wasn't going anywhere. If Caldwell wanted a fight, he was going to get one. It didn't take long for things to escalate. Caldwell seemed to take Marcus's calm reaction as a challenge, and his behavior became more aggressive. What started as passive-aggressive stares and unnecessary police calls turned into full-blown harassment. One evening, Marcus stepped outside to find debris floating in his pool. Dead leaves, dirt, even an old soda can. He frowned, knowing he had just cleaned it the day before. Then he noticed something even worse. A foul smell coming from the water. As he got closer, he realized someone had dumped what smelled like spoiled milk into the pool. His stomach turned in disgust. He glanced up, and sure enough, Caldwell was sitting on his porch, watching. The old man didn't say a word, just smirked before casually taking a sip of his beer. Marcus took a deep breath. He refused to give Caldwell the reaction he wanted. Instead, he pulled out his phone and took pictures of the mess. He would document everything. The next day, he installed security cameras around his backyard, making sure one had a clear view of Caldwell's property line. If the man wanted to keep harassing him, he'd at least have proof. But the cameras didn't stop Caldwell. If anything, they seemed to make him more brazen. He started shouting things over the fence. "Some of us have been here for decades, not just a couple years," he sneered one afternoon while Marcus was grilling. "We actually belong here." Marcus didn't respond. He refused to play into Caldwell's game. A few nights later, Marcus was woken up by a loud banging sound. He sat up in bed, heart pounding. Then another bang. It was coming from outside. He grabbed his phone and checked the cameras. His jaw clenched when he saw Caldwell standing by the fence, throwing something into his yard. Marcus hurried outside, his pulse racing. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" Caldwell didn't even flinch, Just getting rid of some junk, he said casually. Marcus looked down. Caldwell had tossed old bricks and chunks of concrete onto his grass, heavy, sharp pieces that could easily damage his lawnmower or worse, hurt someone. Marcus took a deep breath. He pulled out his phone and recorded everything. You do realize this is illegal, right? Caldwell shrugged. Prove it. Marcus turned his camera toward the security system sign in his yard. I already did. For a moment, Caldwell hesitated, his smirk faltering. Then he turned and walked back inside without another word. Marcus spent the next morning filing a police report. He had video footage, timestamps, and pictures of the damage. But when the officer arrived, he barely looked at the evidence before shrugging. Well, it's not technically property damage unless anything's broken, the officer said. We can file a report, but unless something escalates, there's not much we can do. Marcus felt his blood boil, but he kept his face neutral. I see, he said, pocketing his phone. Caldwell was winning, at least for now. But Marcus wasn't about to let him get away with this. If the law wouldn't help him, he'd find another way to fight back. Marcus knew he couldn't keep playing defense forever. Caldwell was relentless, and no matter how much evidence Marcus gathered, the authorities weren't taking it seriously. It was clear that if he wanted peace, he would have to take control of the situation himself. But instead of stooping to Caldwell's level, he decided to get creative. One afternoon, while scrolling through real estate listings, Marcus came across something interesting. The vacant lot right next to Caldwell's house, the one Caldwell had been talking about buying for years, was officially up for sale. Marcus had overheard Caldwell bragging to other neighbors about his plans to extend his backyard, maybe even put in a workshop. But now, with the property on the market, Caldwell hadn't made a move yet. A slow smile spread across Marcus's face. He had an idea. Without hesitation, he contacted a real estate agent and scheduled a meeting with the seller. Within 2 weeks, the paperwork was signed and the lot was his. Just like that, Marcus owned the one piece of land Caldwell had been dreaming about for years. The best part? Caldwell had no idea. Marcus waited until everything was finalized before making his move. Early one morning, trucks rolled into the vacant lot and workers started clearing the space. Caldwell, who usually spent his mornings sipping coffee on his porch, was quick to notice. Hey, he barked, storming over to the property line. What the hell's going on? One of the workers glanced up. Construction. New pool and community space going in. Caldwell's face turned red. Community space? Who the hell is building that? Marcus, standing a few feet away, stepped forward with a grin. I am. Caldwell's eyes widened. You? Yep, Marcus said, crossing his arms. Just closed the deal last week. Caldwell looked like he had been punched in the gut. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, struggling to find words. You can't just buy this land. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Pretty sure I can. And I did. For the first time, Caldwell had nothing to say. He just stood there, fists clenched, his face a mixture of rage and disbelief. Over the next few weeks, construction moved fast. The lot, once an empty patch of grass, was transformed into a beautiful recreational space. A brand new pool, a sleek outdoor lounge, and even a small barbecue area, all designed for the community to enjoy. Marcus made sure to invite all the neighbors. Families came with their kids, people brought food to share, and laughter filled the air. It was a space for everyone. Well, almost everyone. Caldwell stayed on his porch, watching with barely contained fury as people swam, laughed, and enjoyed the space he had once wanted for himself. He tried complaining to the HOA, but since the property was privately owned and within regulations, there was nothing they could do. Marcus had won. Not by sinking to Caldwell's level, but by outsmarting him in a way he never saw coming. And the best part? Every time Marcus lounged by the pool, drink in hand, he could see Caldwell watching from his porch, knowing he had lost. Caldwell's anger was impossible to miss. Every time Marcus stepped outside, he could feel the man's eyes burning into him. The new community pool was a hit, with neighbors stopping by regularly to swim, grill, and relax in the open space. Children splashed in the water, parents chatted at the picnic tables, and laughter filled the air almost every evening. But Caldwell? He was furious. At first, he tried to ignore it, pretending the lot next to his house didn't exist. He stopped sitting on his porch in the mornings and even planted shrubs along his fence, as if that would somehow block out the sight of people enjoying themselves. But no matter how much he tried to act like it didn't bother him, his frustration seeped through. One Saturday afternoon, while Marcus was hosting a community barbecue, Caldwell finally snapped. Unbelievable, he muttered loud enough for Marcus to hear. Marcus, tending to the grill, glanced over with an easy smile. Something wrong, Caldwell? The old man stormed toward the fence, his face red. You think this is funny, don't you? Turning this place into a damn amusement park just to piss me off? Marcus kept his cool. I think it's great that the community has a place to come together. He flipped a burger. You're welcome to join, you know, Caldwell scoffed. Join? With you? His voice dripped with disgust. I don't want any part of this circus. Suit yourself. Marcus shrugged and turned his attention back to the food. He had expected Caldwell to lash out, but he didn't care. The man had spent months trying to intimidate him, make him feel unwelcome. Now the tables had turned, and Marcus wasn't about to let Caldwell ruin his moment. But Caldwell wasn't done yet. A few days later, Marcus woke up to a notice taped to his front door, an official complaint filed with the HOA. According to Caldwell, the pool was a nuisance, causing noise disturbances and attracting unwanted guests. Marcus read the complaint twice, shaking his head with a laugh. Unwanted guests? Caldwell meant black guests. He had been fine when the neighborhood was mostly quiet and controlled, but now that people were openly enjoying themselves, especially people who didn't look like him, he couldn't stand it. Marcus attended the next HOA meeting, bringing along a few neighbors who had nothing but praise for the new space. I think it's great, one woman said. My kids love having a safe place to swim. My husband and I use it all the time, another neighbor added. It's better than having to drive across town to the public pool. The HOA board listened, and in the end, Caldwell's complaint was dismissed. There were no violations, no rules broken, just one bitter old man who hated seeing Marcus thrive. Caldwell had lost yet again, but this time, something shifted. He stopped coming outside altogether, stopped glaring at Marcus over the fence. It was as if he had finally realized that no matter what he did, he couldn't win. And Marcus? He swam in his pool that night, enjoying the peaceful silence, knowing he had finally taken back his space. For good. Caldwell's defeat was obvious. The man who had spent so much time trying to make Marcus uncomfortable was now a ghost of his former self. His presence, once an everyday nuisance, had faded into the background. No more yelling over the fence, no more passive-aggressive complaints, just silence. Marcus couldn't say he was surprised. The moment Caldwell realized he had no control over Marcus, that his intimidation tactics had failed, he started to crumble. He still lived next door, but he barely stepped outside anymore. The once neatly trimmed lawn now had patches of overgrown grass. The porch, once his throne for watching the neighborhood, sat empty. Marcus had won, but not in the way Caldwell had expected. He hadn't fought back with aggression. He hadn't let the old man's hate consume him. Instead, he had done the one thing Caldwell couldn't handle. He had thrived. The community pool became a staple in the neighborhood. Families continued to gather, kids laughed and splashed in the water, and Marcus even organized weekend cookouts. The energy was different now, lighter, freer. The tension that had once clouded his home had lifted, replaced by warmth and unity. One afternoon, as Marcus relaxed by the pool, sipping a cold drink, he noticed a for sale sign in Caldwell's yard. He smirked. It wasn't a surprise. Caldwell had lost his power, and without that, there was no reason for him to stay. He had built his entire identity around controlling the space around him, and now that he couldn't, he was running away. A few weeks later, moving trucks pulled up in front of Caldwell's house. Marcus watched from his porch as workers loaded furniture into the truck. Caldwell himself stood off to the side, arms crossed, his face twisted in frustration. When he caught Marcus's eye, there was no smugness left, no gloating, just bitterness. Marcus gave him a small nod. Moving on. Huh? Caldwell huffed. Not like I have much of a choice. Marcus tilted his head. You always had a choice. Caldwell glared at him for a long moment before turning away. He didn't respond, didn't offer any final words. Instead, he climbed into his truck, slammed the door, and drove off without looking back. Marcus exhaled, letting go of the last bit of tension that had been lingering for months. He had stood his ground. He had refused to let hate push him out of his own home. And in the end, the man who tried to make him feel small was the one who had been forced to leave. That night, Marcus sat by the pool, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood, the chatter of families, the occasional splash of water, the hum of laughter drifting through the air. This was his home. Not just the house, not just the property, but the community. And no one, not Caldwell, not the HOA, not anyone, was going to take that away from him. With a satisfied sigh, he leaned back, taking in the peaceful night. Victory never tasted so sweet.